Hello and welcome back to Trigger Smart. Today I'm going to talk about something that's really interesting. I know that people have heard that TPUSA has been putting chapters in certain schools in certain states. I believe in Texas, it is basically mandatory that the high schools allow a TPUSA chapter. And I figured they were just extremely widely accepted. But a couple of stories came out and I'm starting to see maybe a different story. So let's look into that.
The student government at St. John's University in New York rejected an application from Turning Point USA. Turning Point was not alone. Other applications were rejected too. St. John's is a private Catholic school. Was the rejection based on politics? Does the First Amendment apply to private schools which receive federal money? Joining us as spokesperson for Turning Point USA, Andrew Colvett. Welcome, Andrew. I want to, again, express my sympathy at the loss of your friend. They say time heals all things. It doesn't. So my sympathies to you. I know that you lost an extremely close friend. Tell us what happened, which criterion were allegedly unmet, and whether TPUSA will reapply at St. John's.
Yeah, well, thank you for the sentiment, Trey. And you're right. There's certain things you don't get over, but we're doing our best to continue honoring what Charlie's mission was and his legacy through Turning Point. So, and I'm so glad to talk about St. John's because this is exactly what he spent his life doing. And to answer your question, no, they didn't give us much clarity at all. Their letter to us was vague. It just said, "Sorry, at this time we regret to inform you." And it's a lot of hypocrisy involved, especially, Trey, I want to highlight this for your audience, with Catholic and Christian private universities across the country. We are at a point now, Trey, after Charlie's assassination, where all the Ivy Leagues, which historically never let us form chapters, they're all getting on board. And they're lapping these private Catholic and Christian universities.
So I just want to point out here really quick, listen to what he is saying. He's saying a private entity will not let us in. And he just said the Ivy League schools didn't let them in previously, and now they are. That's great, sure. If they're a good organization and they're doing good things and they're vetting their pastors and leadership for criminal activity, especially against youth, then great. That's awesome if it's a good cause. But a private entity, as far as I know, doesn't legally have any obligation to let you in. So just listen to what he says about this.
They are time and time again the worst of the worst. When it comes to St. John's, we got rejected the first time in 2020. Then we got rejected again in 2024, and now again just recently. And what's interesting about this, actually, our field rep in New York City is a guy named Anthony Romano. I recommend everybody check him out on X. He's been keeping everybody apprised of this story. He was actually the chapter member that was trying to form the RSO in 2020, gets rejected, was so disappointed at St. John's because he's a proud Catholic, local New York boy. He ended up transferring to Alabama and getting involved in the chapter there. And once he graduated, he went to work for us, and now he's trying to do the good work that he can in New York City because he sees the hypocrisy in plain view. I mean, there's every kind of LGBTQ plus group you can imagine. There's pro-Palestine groups at St. John's. They even make housing for gender-affirming housing, and they have special lavender graduation ceremonies, everything you can imagine at St. John's. But for some reason, a pro-America, pro-capitalist, conservative student group is beyond the pale for these folks.
Well, like a smart guy, you anticipated my next question. I was going to ask you, when I hear Catholic, I think anti-death penalty, for instance, which I respect. I mean, if that's your position, that's fine. It's not mine, but if that's yours, that's fine. I was going to ask you, are there groups that have been approved that would make us think this is rank hypocrisy? It is content-based discrimination, but you just laid out things that I'm pretty sure the Catholic Church doesn't teach.
Yeah, well, they even have a letter, and I apologize for looking at my phone because it blew me away. I was like, I need that written. They have their bishops support LGBTQ and affirm them. So, it's a very fascinating thing. And I have a list here, Trey, because again, this isn't just a problem at St. John's. This is across the country at Catholic and Christian private universities. Time and time again, they are the biggest cowards. And so I'm going to call them out. Loyola University, Xavier, Seton Hall, Azusa Pacific, Point Loma Nazarene, Catholic University. This has been a trend, and it typically is a situation where they're, a Christian or Catholic university in a blue state, and they don't want to offend the political leaders of that state.
There's a few different ways you can look at this. The first way is that if you believe in TPUSA and what they're doing, and you believe it's for a good cause, and you are on the right, then everything they're saying is, yes, you would want to get TPUSA and their ideologies in a chapter in those locations where there's a lot of wokeism. But the other side of that is it's a private university or a private organization. And you are basically trying to bully them and defame them on Fox News to try to force them to let you in.
And so time and time again, the university presidents could overrule these decisions. They could overrule them and intercede. They choose not to. So if you happen to be an alumnus or a donor at some of these universities I just mentioned, the only way to get around this at a private Christian or Catholic school is to put pressure on them. So we're asking for your help out there. Put the pressure on. Let them know this is not okay. Let them know that the hypocrisy is not okay. These are school chapters.
Now I want to switch gears a little bit. This is another video. This is also for St. John's.
This just sparked a fierce campus battle. At St. John's University, the student government rejected a proposal to start a Turning Point USA chapter in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, saying it failed the recognition process, a decision critics call suppression of conservative voices and free speech.
So again, if you have a private church, if you have a private school, you can tell them no. Should they keep attempting to come in and harassing you and defaming you and threatening you, kind of, right? It's not a direct threat, but they're basically saying like, hey, we're going to put a ton of pressure on you. We're going to challenge you and force you basically to let us in there as much as we can. And they've been trying for, 2022, 2020. So, it's been 5 or 6 years of being rejected by this school, and they just keep going, which, again, if they're a good organization and they have something to offer, then maybe this should be considered. But I'm not sure if it's appropriate to act in this manner where you're saying you're going to get a bunch of people to put pressure on them. That sounds kind of familiar, right? There's certain groups that are putting pressure on other groups to try to force them to believe something or act a certain way. Turning Point USA, a conservative activist organization founded by Charlie Kirk in 2012, focuses on promoting free market principles, limited government, and cultural conservatism through student chapters on campuses and high schools. This says that they are doing free market principles and limited government, yet they are trying to force and pressure themselves into these private organizations. TPUSA Faith, launched in 2021, extends the mission, and that goes to churches, and it encourages pastors and congregations to engage in political activism framed as biblical citizenship. And this is some of the stuff that some people are alleging is crossing the lines as a 501c3 into political activism and basically pushing very specific candidates and or parties, which they're not technically allowed to do. The organization has 1,400 college chapters, 3,000 plus high school chapters, branded as Club America, and partnerships with more than 9,500 churches as of late 2025, with explosive growth after Charlie Kirk's assassination, receiving over 140,000 student inquiries and doubling the church network. While TPUSA emphasizes voluntary student-led initiatives and church partnerships, critics from groups like the American Association of University Professors, Southern Poverty Law Center, and some Christian discernment ministries accuse the organization of aggressive tactics, such as forcing pressure on them until they accept them, including staging provocations, leveraging political pressure, and promoting controversial ideologies like Christian nationalism and dominionism to expand influence. TPUSA's expansion into schools has involved staff and volunteers providing resources like organizing guides, speaker bureaus, and campaigns to help students establish chapters. However, this has led to numerous denials by school administrations, often citing concerns over the group's provocative style, ties to extremism, or duplication of existing clubs. In response, TPUSA and supportive Republican-led states have used legal and political pressure to override denials, which critics view as forcing chapters onto unwilling institutions. And here we have Erica Kirk. She's with Dan Patrick. And this is Allie Top Files with this post. And she says, there's this book. And the book says, Turning Point Education. So is there a Turning Point school? Are they doing educational content inside these chapters? Or is this something that's up and coming? So let's look at this here. Turning Point Education. The Turning Point Education team has a wealth of academic, business, and ministry experience and a passion for seeing Western civilization thrive, young people flourish, and God exalted by all. And here we have their leadership. And some of these are familiar faces, especially this pastor here, John Amanchukwu, if I'm saying that correctly. I believe he was also on Didi Got a Podcast and did an interview with him talking about some of the Charlie Kirk stuff, I believe, as well as the pastoral work. But it's interesting that the Turning Point Education has a pastor as an advocate. Now, before I did this video, I was unaware of TP Education. I've heard of Turning Point Endowment, Turning Point Action, and TPUSA Faith in addition to TPUSA. But now apparently there's the education wing. We did hear rumors of a possible political run by Erica Kirk from Frank Turek and from Mikey McCoy in a call with Rob McCoy. And then we've also heard rumors of like a TPUSA realty or like realtor training or a realty company or something similar. So it seems like they're really branching out. Now, here are some allegations and reports from people that have dealt with TPUSA trying to get it chapters done. State level mandates and threats, Texas, Florida, Oklahoma, 2025. Governors and officials have actively pushed for TPUSA chapters in public schools, threatening action against resistant districts. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott announced a plan to establish chapters in every high school, directing complaints to the Texas Education Agency for meaningful disciplinary action against blockers. So they are forcing these high schools to specifically allow a TPUSA chapter. They don't have a choice, framing it as a values-driven mission. Florida's Attorney General avowed legal action against schools rejecting chapters, citing viewpoint discrimination. Oklahoma's education chief partnered with TPUSA to place chapters in every school, despite union opposition, reporting record requests but overriding woke administrators. These efforts follow a surge of 120,000 plus chapter inquiries post Charlie Kirk's death, with TPUSA starting 50 new chapters daily. Critics include parents and educators. They argue that this constitutes government-forced imposition, potentially violating local autonomy and exposing students to racist, homophobic, and sexist rhetoric. And also remember, too, that the line between TPUSA Faith, TPUSA Action, and TPUSA seems to get blurred quite a bit. And now if you put them in schools and force them in schools, are there going to be other lines that are crossed or potentially crossed? University denials and persistent attempts, multiple Christian and public institutions, 2021 to 2025. That's like that first video that we watched. Several Christian colleges rejected TPUSA chapters, citing conflicts with faith policies or the group's professor watch list, which profiles radical professors and has driven harassment. Point Loma Nazarene University denied a chapter 3 times, fearing a TPUSA faith arm would eliminate wokeism in churches. Vanguard University Christian banned all political groups after a TPUSA chapter went underground. Catholic University of America rejected applications in 2021 and 2025, claiming overlap with existing groups. But students alleged bias and reported their social media being shut down. St. John's University Catholic and Loyola University New Orleans denied chapters twice each. TPUSA's response often involves public campaigns or going on Fox News, legal advocacy from groups like First Liberty University, and claims of free speech violations. The AAUP notes TPUSA chapters stage and film controversies to gain visibility, including violent incidents like an assault at Arizona State University, high school controversies and harassment. At Fremont High School in Utah, a chapter sparked controversy after Kirk's death, with supporters claiming silencing attempts. In Colorado, students faced poster vandalism by teachers and hallway harassment, leading to disbandment. Petitions emerged to remove chapters from schools like Seguro High in Arizona and Eagle Valley High in Colorado, citing National TPUSA's alleged hate speech. Mike Benz suggested federal intervention for civil rights violations and denials. And similarly, TPUSA Faith targets churches by offering sermon templates, training, voter registration drives, and events like Freedom Night in America or pastor summits to equip the faith community for civic engagement. Partnerships are voluntary, yet they're using political and legal pressure to force people to do what they want. Partnerships are voluntary, but critics accuse TPUSA of infiltrating churches with dominionist or NAR-influenced theology, take back the nation through spiritual warfare, blurring church-state lines, which I've spoken about, and using grift tactics. No sources describe outright forcing, but aggressive recruitment and platforming controversial figures. Now, this is really interesting as well. TPUSA Faith grew from 4,200 to 9,500 church partnerships post Kirk's death. So they more than doubled, hosting events at venues like Foothills Christian Church and Freedom House Church. In Maine, 20-plus churches launched chapters in 2025. So it's not like they're not growing. They've more than doubled in size. So why are they pushing so hard to be in everywhere and everything with everyone, even these private organizations and churches and schools? Critics like former TPUSA Faith contributor John Root alleged exploitation, such as Foyt's donation asked during false revival events bankrolled by TPUSA, theological and political pressure. Various churches, TPUSA Faith encourages pastors to court political controversy and view activism as a gospel mandate. And again, that's where you're starting to blur those lines of church and state. And as a 501c3, that's why certain people like Danks and Wilson Finance are looking into this to see if there's something there that might possibly be illegal or, tap dancing on the edge of illegal. Partnering with figures like Rob McCoy, the SPLC describes this as promoting Christian supremacy and myths of persecution to mobilize churches. At events like America Fest 2025, leaders framed TPUSA as building a Christian nation, exposing rifts in the Christian right. Some churches, like those associated with Churches of Christ, host chapters, but grapple with Kirk's legacy of prioritizing politics over doctrine. And I think that kind of goes back to this gospel mandate of courting political controversies. Now, supporters of TPUSA, they argue that these efforts defend free speech and biblical values against woke suppression, with legal backing from the First Amendment. I know many people would probably argue that the Biden administration did the exact opposite. They were pushing wokeism and LGBTQ rights and transgender people reading books to children and transgender people in full drag in a church teaching the sermon or dancing up and down the aisles, right? So it was like the exact opposite extreme. And here we have the TPUSA chapters list. Doesn't look like they're doing too bad. It looks like red is the chapters, and then blue is activism hubs. A lot of people get confused about the difference between political activism and political campaigns, which is where that 501c3, you kind of tap dancing on the edge, right? So activism refers to direct, often grassroots actions, such as protests, boycotts, or in some cases, civil disobedience. Now remember that TPUSA sent busloads of kids, or I guess college students, whatever they were, out to the J6 event. And that's aimed primarily at achieving social or political change. Now, a political campaign, which you are not allowed to do as a 501c3, is a structured, strategic, and often time-bound process that uses organized efforts, communication, and frequently policy advocacy to reach specific measurable goals. Now, many people would argue that that's what Charlie Kirk was doing with TPUSA to get Trump elected. Now, as many of you know, Arctic Frost was the codename for a 2022 FBI investigation into President Donald Trump and his allies, and that also included Charlie Kirk and TPUSA. There's a video out that shows Charlie basically saying that if President Trump hadn't won, that he would probably go to federal prison. And I don't know what specifically the Biden administration was looking for or looking into, but there's a lot of allegations out there. So it's very interesting that it almost seemed, this is just my opinion, that Charlie Kirk and TPUSA crossed the line, possibly, of the 501c3 and went from political activism into campaigning. And then we had Erica Kirk endorsing J.D. Vance at a TPUSA event. Now, they are not supposed to endorse a specific candidate. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think that there's some funny business going here? Or is this just business as usual? Is this something you would expect from this type of organization? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this around. And if you want to support the channel, there are links down in the description. I'll see you on the next one.